Tonight, the spotlight shifts back to Detroit, a basketball city rediscovering something it has waited for nearly 2 decades to feel again: belief. The Pistons were once the league standard for toughness, for discipline, for postseason basketball that demanded your attention, and now led by a new generation. That identity is beginning to return. Tuesday night wasn't just a Game 1 victory, it was a confirmation. Cade Cunningham looked every bit the centerpiece of a contender. The crowd inside Little Caesars Arena sounded like spring basketball had finally come home, and the top seed in the East played with the confidence of a team that believes this moment belongs to them. But if there's one thing playoff basketball teaches us every year, it's this: the second game is often the one that tells the truth. Because Cleveland arrives tonight not desperate, but urgent. Donovan Mitchell has lived too long in postseason spotlights to let a series drift quietly away. The Cavaliers know they missed opportunities in Game 1. They know Detroit's defense sped them up, disrupted rhythm, and turned transition basketball into a weapon. And they know that falling behind 2-0 before heading back to Ohio changes the entire shape of this matchup. So now the questions get louder. Can Cade Cunningham continue his rise into superstardom on the playoff stage? Can Detroit's young core handle the emotional weight of expectation? And can Cleveland respond with the poise and force veteran teams are supposed to show in moments like this? Game 2, a city roaring again, a contender trying to prove it's real, and a veteran challenger determined to remind everyone this series is far from settled. The NBA playoffs continue. Greetings from our connected studios. Welcome to the Hardwood Report. Tonight, from downtown Detroit, the top-seeded Detroit Pistons look to take a commanding 2-0 lead in this Eastern Conference semifinal series against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And if Game 1 told us anything, it's this: Detroit is no longer simply a feel-good playoff story. This is a confident, mature basketball team that believes the road to the Eastern Conference Finals now goes through them. Tuesday night, the Pistons controlled the pace, controlled the glass, and perhaps most importantly, controlled the fourth quarter. Cade Cunningham once again looked every bit like the franchise cornerstone Detroit hoped for when they built this roster around him. 23 points in Game 1, poise under pressure, and an ability to dictate tempo that continues to separate him from many young stars in this league. He doesn't appear rushed by the postseason. In fact, he appears energized by it. But what makes Detroit dangerous is that this is no longer a one-man operation. Usher Thompson has become a defensive disruptor, capable of changing possessions with his length and athleticism. Their transition game has been outstanding all season long, fourth best in the conference in fast break scoring, and when Detroit gets downhill, they can overwhelm you in waves. For Cleveland, tonight feels significant, not desperate, perhaps, but undeniably important. The Cavaliers came into this postseason with expectations of competing for a conference title, yet through one game, they looked reactive instead of assertive. Donovan Mitchell finished with 23 points Tuesday night, but Detroit made every possession difficult, crowning him defensively and forcing Cleveland into stretches where their offense became stagnant. And there's another fascinating story tonight: the presence of James Harden in a Cavaliers uniform, still searching for the kind of defining postseason run that has eluded him throughout much of his otherwise remarkable career. Over the last 10 games, Harden has quietly steadied Cleveland's offense, but against this Detroit's defense, efficiency matters more than volume. The Cavaliers cannot afford empty possessions tonight. The numbers entering Game 2 tell you how evenly matched these teams can be. Cleveland averages nearly 120 points per game, one of the league's most explosive offenses. Detroit, meanwhile, counters with physicality, defensive pressure, and a willingness to turn games ugly if necessary. And in the playoffs, ugly can win. The atmosphere tonight should be electric inside Little Caesars Arena. Detroit basketball has always carried a certain identity, toughness, resilience, edge, and for the first time in many years, this city feels genuinely connected to a team capable of something special. Later tonight, the scene shifts to Oklahoma City, where the top-seeded Oklahoma City Thunder will try to tighten their grip on this Western Conference semifinal series against the Los Angeles Lakers. And after Game 1, there's a growing sense that Oklahoma City may be exactly what many believed all season long: the most complete team remaining in these playoffs. The Thunder didn't simply beat the Lakers. They controlled them defensively, physically, emotionally. A 108-90 victory that never truly felt as close as the final score suggested. What stood out most was the maturity of this young Oklahoma City roster. There was no panic, no rush, no sense that the moment was too large. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander once again orchestrated the game with remarkable calm, and while his scoring continues to draw headlines, it's his command of pace that has elevated Oklahoma City into championship territory. Then there was Chet Holmgren. 24 points in Game 1, protection around the rim, rebounding, spacing the floor. He impacted virtually every important stretch of that game. And with Jalen Williams sidelined by a hamstring injury, Holmgren's role becomes even more essential tonight. For the Lakers, the challenge is obvious, and it may be overwhelming. No Luka Doncic because of the hamstring injury means the offensive burden once again falls heavily on the ageless wonder of LeBron James, who at this stage of his career continues to do remarkable things simply to keep his team competitive. His 27 points in Game 1 were admirable, but the larger issue for Los Angeles was offensive rhythm. They struggled generating clean looks, struggled spacing the floor, and struggled matching Oklahoma City's speed in transition. And perhaps most concerning for the Lakers is the number attached to tonight's game. Thunder favored by 15.5 points. In the second round of the playoffs, that number is almost startling. It reflects not only Oklahoma City's dominance this season, but also the uncertainty surrounding the Lakers' ability to keep pace offensively without Doncic available. Still, postseason basketball has a way of creating unexpected turns. The Lakers remain experienced, battle-tested, and dangerous if they can slow the tempo and force this game into a half-court grind. Rui Hachimura could be a critical factor tonight, particularly from beyond the arc, where Los Angeles desperately needs supplementary scoring. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City continues to look like a franchise arriving ahead of schedule. 64 regular season wins, one of the league's best defensive teams, one of its fastest offenses, and perhaps most impressively, a roster that appears completely unfazed by playoff pressure. More on these games in a moment, but first, here's what's happening in the NBA. We begin tonight in New York, where there is concern surrounding the health of one of the postseason's most impactful players. OG Anunoby has been diagnosed with a right hamstring strain and is considered day-to-day ahead of Game 3 between the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers. According to reports, the strain is not believed to be serious, but Anunoby is expected to be listed as questionable as the series shifts to Philadelphia. The injury came late in Game 2 after Anunoby appeared uncomfortable following a dunk attempt before singling to the bench moments later. And the timing could hardly be worse for New York. Anunoby has quietly become one of the Knicks' most important postseason players, averaging efficient scoring, elite perimeter defense, and timely shot making as New York grabbed a 2-0 lead in the series. Meanwhile, in Charlotte, the Charlotte Hornets are rewarding progress and stability. Head coach Charles Lee has agreed to a contract extension after leading the Hornets to a remarkable 25-win improvement this season. Charlotte just finished one victory shy, ending the franchise's decade-long playoff drought, and the organization clearly believes Lee has established himself as the foundation for long-term success. And finally, one of the night's most eye-opening results came in San Antonio after a narrow Game 1 loss. The San Antonio Spurs responded with authority, defeating the Minnesota Timberwolves by 38 points to even their Western Conference semifinal series at 1 game apiece. Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox set the tone early, while rookie guard Stephon Castle delivered a game-high 21 points in what became San Antonio's most explosive playoff offensive performance in decades. The Spurs overwhelmed Minnesota in transition, played with significantly more physicality, and reminded everyone why many around the league believe this young core may already be ahead of schedule. Game 3 now shifts to Minneapolis Friday night, with the series tied at 1. So, with that, we get you ready for Game 2 tonight in Detroit. And I got to tell you, every postseason, every single year, you get a series where the stars are the stars, sure. But then you got these characters, these oddball guys who suddenly become impossible to ignore. And right now in this Cavs-Pistons series, you've got 2 of them. You got James Harden, who somehow looks washed for 3 quarters and then turns into 2018 Harden for 6 minutes. And you got this kid, Dennis Jenkins in Detroit, who half the country didn't know existed a month ago. And now he's out there talking trash, grabbing offensive rebounds, hitting buzzer beaters, sneering at crowds like he's been in the league 10 years. And honestly, that's what makes playoff basketball great, because Jenkins is one of those classic playoff stories. G League guy. Bounced around colleges, nobody drafted him, and now suddenly he's becoming the emotional pulse of the number 1 seed in the East. Those guys matter. Fans love those guys. Every good playoff team has one. The Knicks had guys like that. The old Heat teams had them. The Pistons back in the day always had one guy driving up opponents' nuts. And this kid, he's got that energy. He talks, he competes, he annoys you. And if you're Cleveland, after about 2 games, you're sitting there saying, who is this guy? And why is he killing us? And then there's Harden, who's become one of the strangest stars we've ever seen, because with Harden now, every possession feels like an argument between the past and the present. One trip down the floor, he looks 36 years old, dribbling into traffic, turning it over, moving slow. Next possession, it's a step back 3, foul drawn, perfect pass in transition, crowd going nuts. It's like watching 2 careers happening at once. And I'll say this, pairing him with Donovan Mitchell actually makes this series more interesting than people expected, because there are 2 guys carrying playoff reputations they're trying desperately to change. Mitchell's never made a conference finals. Harden's fighting the ghost of every bad playoff headline he's ever had. So now every game becomes psychological. Every turnover gets magnified. Every fourth quarter run feels enormous. But Jenkins doesn't care about narratives. That's what makes him fun. He's out there like a guy who still thinks he's trying to make the roster tomorrow morning. He thinks this is summer league, And sometimes those are the most dangerous players in the postseason because they play free. There's no fear. There's no baggage. It's just raw, pure energy. And that's why this series has become entertaining. Not because it's perfect basketball. It's sloppy. It's messy. Turnovers are everywhere. There's weird scoring droughts. Stars are struggling. But it's got personalities now. It's got some tension. It's got a forgotten G League guard becoming a cult hero while Harden tries to rewrite the final chapter of his career. And that's playoff basketball, folks. Sometimes the series you remember aren't the cleanest ones. They're the weird ones, the emotional ones, the ones where some random guy starts jawing in Game 2 and suddenly the whole building hates him by Game 5. And honestly, those are usually the best series. And this series changed tones after Game 1. It really did, because now the Cavaliers walk into this building understanding something very important. Detroit is not intimidated by them, not even a little bit. And a big reason why is those two guys we just talked about. First, Dennis Jenkins. The Pistons suddenly have this energy player who changes the rhythm of games. He speeds them up, pressures the ball, talks constantly, and most importantly, he gives Cade Cunningham relief from having to create every possession. And that matters enormous in a playoff series. Cleveland spent so much attention trying to trap Cade late in Game 1 that Jenkins quietly became the release valve. Offensive rebounds, transition pushes, secondary ball handling, those are series-changing possessions. If Jenkins gives Detroit another productive 20 minutes tonight, this crowd is going to feed off of him all night long. And then on the Cleveland side, it all circles back to Harden because Harden actually holds the emotional temperature of this team right now. Donovan Mitchell is going to score, no doubt about it. We know he's going to attack. But Harden determines whether Cleveland looks organized or chaotic. In Game 1, when he turned the ball over, the Cavs looked old and disconnected. When he settled down in the fourth quarter, suddenly Cleveland looked dangerous again. And that's the entire pressure point of Game 2. Can Harden control tempo enough to keep Detroit from turning this into a track meet? Because Detroit wants chaos. They want transition basketball. They want Cade downhill. They want Jenkins flying around defensively. They want offensive rebounds and loose balls and emotion. Cleveland wants execution. And now suddenly this series feels a lot more dangerous for the Cavaliers than people expected. Now, I want to really break this game down because there are bigger adjustments tonight, and I think the biggest adjustment for Cleveland has to be turnovers. It sounds simple, but it's everything. Detroit's athleticism overwhelmed Cleveland at stretches in Game 1. The Pistons turned live ball turnovers into instant offense. And when Detroit gets running, they become very difficult to defend because Cade Cunningham controls pace so beautifully. In transition, he's patient without being slow, and that's rare for a young superstar. And Cade's growth is undeniable now. I mean, this isn't potential anymore. This is a franchise player controlling playoff games. 23 points in Game 1. Command of tempo. Dictating where defenders moved. He looked like the best player on the floor for long stretches. Now, Cleveland still has advantages. Cavaliers can score in bunches. Mitchell remains the most explosive scorer in the series. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can absolutely dominate the glass if they play physically enough. And frankly, Cleveland's offense still hasn't had one true great playoff game. I don't think. Not with Mitchell, and definitely not with Mitchell and Harden operating together at a high level simultaneously. You go back to last year, that Pacers series, they didn't, if you look at all those games, there wasn't one true great game in that series. I didn't think. If you and maybe they're all out there, but now and you go back to the first round, right? With Cleveland, they didn't wow me in the first round, not really. It was okay, but I just and that's why I don't hate on people for saying I'm not buying Cleveland. Because they haven't wowed, and maybe there's something there, but maybe I don't know. You took Toronto to 7, and Toronto took you to 7, and to me that was more impressive of Toronto, not so much you. I think people are going to remember the first round of this series against Cleveland in Toronto, and I think they're going to remember what Toronto did. That shot to force the Game 7, I think, is what everybody's going to remember. It's not the Cavaliers. Wasn't the Cavaliers last season either. But you still feel, with all that said, you still feel like there's another gear offensively available to them, and I'm not knocking that here, okay? because they are a great team. They've made the playoffs, 2 years in a row, and that. But there is a problem though, and it's Detroit's defense is making Cleveland uncomfortable possessions before the possessions ever begin. Asher Thompson has become a huge factor in this series because of his versatility. He can switch on to Mitchell, disrupt passing lanes, and recover in transition. He doesn't need to score 20 points to control a game. His athleticism alone changes possessions. Now let's get to the keys tonight. Number one, Cleveland must survive the first quarter. The Little Caesars Arena is going to be insane tonight. Detroit smells opportunity. If the Pistons get out early again, this becomes emotional basketball immediately, and that favors Detroit's younger legs and energy players. Number two, James Harden has to value the basketball. He doesn't have to score 35. He does not need to be Houston Harden, okay? He just needs to control the game, get Cleveland organized offensively, get Mobley touches, show Detroit's runs before they avalanche. Slow them down, right? Number three, Detroit has to win the rebounding battle again. When Detroit rebounds well, Cade controls pace, and the Pistons become incredibly dangerous in transition. If Cleveland dominates the glass, the game slows down into half-court execution, and that favors the Cavaliers. And finally, watch the foul situation with Mitchell. He's already talked openly about frustration not getting calls. If he gets downhill early and gets to the line, Cleveland's offense changes entirely. If Detroit keeps him playing through contact without whistles, frustration's going to start building quickly. So, who do I like tonight? Well, I think this is the desperation game for Cleveland. And usually in the NBA playoffs, desperation matters. I think Mitchell comes out ultra aggressive. I think Harden plays cleaner. I think Cleveland slows the game down just enough to avoid another turnover avalanche. And honestly, I trust veteran urgency in game two. Okay? I think it's close, very close. I think this is a 4-point game. The Cavaliers win it, though. And suddenly we've got ourselves a real series heading back to Cleveland tied at 1 game apiece. That will do it for this episode of the Hardwood Report. We will see you tonight for the Hardwood Report at the half and keep you updated throughout all of the games tonight. Games tonight are on Amazon Prime. Tip-off in about 7 minutes from now. That will do it for us. We will see you at halftime.